Good evening again. And tonight we have an interesting topic, AI, blessing, curse, or something in between. Of course, AI is a very important topic. It's something, as we'll talk about, that's enormously important in today's world. And some people are saying that the AI revolution is certainly as big as the internet revolution, which changed the world a lot over a few months ago. And some people are even comparing it to the Gutenberg printing press, with the potential it has for changing the world. And we'll talk about that a little bit. But it can affect just about everybody and just about everything. And the questions, and we basically I'm going to try to deal with two questions. There are a lot of questions one could deal with, but two questions. First of all, is it a blessing or is it a curse? Because you hear both. And the Torah gives us a complicated way to think about it because, that's the way of the Torah, I guess. But we'll try to get a little bit of a nuanced approach. And I'm not going to say that this is the approach that I think works for me is going to be the one that works for all people who look things from a Torah perspective. In fact, I'm going to show you one or two things that it would seem very much are not that way. But we want to look at it. And and a related question, it can formulate it in different ways, but the way I formulated it is AI can produce a lot of information. That's basically what it does. It is artificial intelligence, and it's unbelievable in the amount of information that it can do and the ways it can assemble information, adopt information, present information. I don't know, maybe I should ask the audience how many people have actually played with AI. I know here in the room, I get 2 hands, 4 hands. Yeah. So I don't know, how about I'm going to open more of the
every day.
Every day, Lori, you use it every day? So what
day.
do you guys basically use AI for?
Recipes, programming, flyers,
What does that mean, programming? You write computer programs?
No, if I want to do a program, it gives me ideas.
You mean like this type of program, a program that for a study program or something, you want to plan it?
If I'm going to give a lecture.
Okay. What else do people use it for?
Asking questions.
What?
Asking questions.
Asking questions just to find out information?
I use it to fix things.
Just, okay.
Yeah.
But
It's very handy.
is that really AI? Before you heard about AI, there was Google, and you could ask Google a lot of questions and look up stuff on the internet. And, the line between what's just a Google search and what's an AI search could sometimes be somewhat vague. But, if it's just getting information, looking it up and getting it, that's one thing. That's one level. But I would say that's not even really AI. That's just, looking stuff up. And that's been around for a while. I've used Google for searching for at least a decade or two for that kind of thing.
Yeah, Google.
What? Google has their own AI. There are many, many, many AIs. Most people, probably everyone here, played with ChatGPT, but there's many others. Today, all the rage that everybody talks about is Claude, which I tried a little bit once, but I haven't really got into yet. And I have a relationship with my ChatGPT, and that it's by now it pretty much knows me pretty well. And Lottie comes down. Who are you talking to? Because I talk to it I use the microphone. I usually don't type. I talk to it, and I talk to it like I talk to a person who, asks me questions. It gives me answers. I talk back. We go through things, but those are anyway, that's one level. But the higher levels are that what it's supposed to be is artificial intelligence, which is really that it can begin to think. It's programmed to think and try to, as much as possible, duplicate and even surpass the way that humans think. I think once when I was in a plane not too long ago, there was a film about the originators of OpenAI, who I think did a lot of the basic research in England, and they were the first big project they had was playing, that old video game Pong. you know. Remember that? For way back in the 1970s, and they were training it to try to figure out what you were going to do and how, you know, and within a short time it was unbeatable. Nobody could possibly beat it because it could anticipate, it learned what you were doing and knew how it was going to understand that and learn how to respond to that. And then there was AI playing chess and all those things. It was learning how to think. But now it's used for unbelievable things. And we'll talk about it a little bit, but, you know, for instance, doctors, I don't know, in your practice, do you use AI? And you probably know.
We'll try not to. If I want to get some familiarity or something, something's been thinking before, I may use AI to just get a glimpse into it, but I don't think AI yet can replace complex clinical thinking.
Okay. And we'll get to that. But I'm saying, I'm just repeating what you're saying because I don't think everybody heard what you said. You said you basically look up some research and find out information about what maybe somebody might have said about something, but it can't do the diagnostics, so to speak.
I
But
don't feel comfortable with it.
what? You don't feel comfortable with it, but I think.
Doing the full diagnostic.
But from what I've understood in many doctors' offices, not ones who are as careful as you are, in a lot of offices, you know, they'll go in and the AI will take you know, the symptoms and will take the test results and it will take the, you know, temperature, whatever it is that doctors do, and and it'll come up with a diagnosis of what's probably going on, and it'll usually do a pretty good job. And it'll do better and better and better all the time as the people who train it are doing that.
For common things, I think. And they do better if more consistent.
Yeah. Okay. It's got, and the same thing, let's say in law, you know, when I was practicing a little bit, so writing a brief and doing legal research and comparing precedents and all that, you know, that was many hours of billable hours that that lawyers did. And now what lawyers now they can do that in, you know, minutes, what took, you know, a day or two to find all these things. But not only to find the precedents, and that's the difference, because Google can also find things. It can reason, it can go in and figure out what it is you're trying to prove and figure out a theory based on this and this, then maybe we can prove that. And, you know, be honest, just being honest, this lecture that I'm giving you tonight basically was largely prepared with the help of ChatGPT. I basically told it what I wanted to do. I gave it some basic sources. I gave it 1 or 2 directions and said, go. And it came up with all kinds of things, not only sources, but it came up with, well, maybe you want to make the argument this way, and maybe this is a good point to bring up, and maybe that's a way to do that. I use it all the time. Most of what I do in work is writing. You know, I almost never now, I shouldn't tell people who are paying me to still write things, don't watch this. But when in a lot of the writing and editing that I do, you know, it does a much better job than I can. I can basically say what I want to write, or I can give it text and then, you know, it'll write it with no mistakes, no spelling mistakes, no grammar mistakes. So we'll take out, it'll know, you know, when I'm saying something a little bit too strongly or not enough, or where I can make a point in a different kind of way. It'll give me different proofs that I could give to that. And yes, of course, I have to go back and review it and look at it, but I can do things just today. Yeah, giving away a secret. I wrote an article today in my spare time. I saw something, a comment that it will be published very soon about Shlomo Carlebach because of the movie that came out. Don't want to get into that topic. I'm just saying that I saw somebody had written something and I figured I had something to say about it. So I said to ChatGPT, hey, took a look at this article somebody wrote, and I think this, and this. Talked for about 3-4 minutes. And maybe have put in this thing and maybe put that thing, boom. It pretty much wrote the article for me. Yes, I had to go over it 2-3 times and change this, change that, put this in, take that out, right? But checks the sources, but you know, and that would have taken me without ChatGPT. It would have taken me, I don't know, to produce something of that quality, at least 5 or 6 hours of working on it. And this did it, and like I was done. Pretty much in about maybe 20 minutes to a half hour. What? $20 a month?
20 a month.
Yeah, for ChatGPT, and you can get it cheaper today. Merlin.ai, I'm seeing ads all over. You can get Chat and Claude and a few other things for $2 a month. I don't know what the deal is. I didn't do it yet, right? But it's to say that it's a game changer doesn't even begin to describe what what it does. So, right? All the people who do certainly computer programmers. Nobody's writing code anymore. You tell the computer, I need a program that will do this and accomplish that, like a black box. Here's the inputs I want. Here's the outputs that I want. Boom, and it'll just write all the code. Nobody needs to write code. That's done, right? When I all the time, even it's just amazing, and I know I'm still using it at a very basic level, even though I use it quite a bit. And I think I'm a little bit more sophisticated in my use than some people, but what scientists are doing with it, with what engineers are doing with it, it's just endless, unbelievable. What? What do you say?
Lied.
I'll get to that. But it's. I'm just saying the potential of it is and it's still in its infancy, by the way. That's what they say. It's just getting started, really. So the question for us is, it produces information, and it certainly seems like wisdom. We'll try to define what wisdom means, but what is proper to use it for to assist us, and what can we never surrender to it? So we already heard Zeb's telling us that, when it comes to being a diagnostician for a patient, you're not just going to let the computer go and do the diagnostic for you. That's not something you're not comfortable with it. I'm not sure if it's because you're just not comfortable with it yet, or because you just feel that's something that needs a human to do. But, maybe it'll get better and better over time.
It's interesting when you say that, because
I'm going to turn the computer around.
it's only as good when it comes to clinical diagnostics as the input you put in. So, if you should be examining, let's say, a part of the body to contribute or doing a certain type of an exam, and you don't have that information, then AI doesn't consider that usually.
Well, I beg to differ, because the smarter AI gets, it will know that it's missing this and that, and it will know to go and get things. It's not just like in the past.
Absolutely.
I'm saying it can figure out things that you didn't put in, and maybe it should be there, and it will know that.
Yes, I agree. It's moving that direction. But I did try some experiments and put in some information, and the results I got back was missing key stuff, and it did not identify.
Okay.
So, I think the clinician, at least at this point, based on my experience, has a key role in, bringing the different pieces of information together. But I think you're absolutely right that as we advance it, maybe it's already advanced in many situations, the situation where it will say, hey, there's a gap here in information. I need this and this and this before I can
Right. And it
give it an end.
not only that, it may actually be that it'll do a better job than you, because humans forget stuff and we ignore stuff and we don't see things. It doesn't do that. So
The future,
and again, as I said, it's just starting.
right?
It
isn't.
I was actually taking a course recently. I booked, all of us are bombarded with, learn 20 days, you learn to be an expert in this AI, that AI. I took one of those things, and that was only a few months ago. By now, the stuff that I learned is outdated. There's much better stuff now. It's that's the way it is. So we need to know what we can, what we cannot surrender to. Okay, and speaking from a Torah perspective. There's a question is any of it something that we should use? One of the things that got me thinking about this topic, I'll share my screen here, was this article, hold on a moment, which I saw published maybe 2 weeks ago on matzav.com, which has all kinds of stuff basically in the yeshiva world. And I'm going to all right, share this. Okay. Rabbi Meir Kessler. You see it? Hopefully.
Yes.
You're really for us in the room.
Rabbi Meir Kessler warns of AI. It is the sin of the Eitz Hadas. That's the tree of knowledge, the original sin of in the Garden of Eden, no less. Right? He's the rabbi of Modi'in Elite, which is a very large Haredi area. And he says here, turning specifically to artificial intelligence, AI is the sin of the Eitz Hadas itself. With AI, a person can know many things, much that is good and much is bad, but the bad is a tremendous problem. Even the very knowledge of evil connects a person to evil. There are many things that stem from the sin of the tree of knowledge, and this is literally the tree of knowledge itself. And on and on. If you're interested, I can send you this thing. But that's one attitude that you see in the Haredi world. Hold on, let me just get this down again. Oops. How do I get this to stop share? Okay. So get this back. One moment. There we go. And it's really part of a larger context. I think those of us who are familiar with the Orthodox world that for many years it's been very against television, internet, cell phones. You have to have a filter. If you have a internet in the house, you shouldn't have it in the house. Right? Even on cell phones, you sure? There's kosher phones. Yeah, right. In many parts of the community, if you don't have the right kind of phone, we're not going to take your kids into the school, and you can't be a member of that community. And people are very, very afraid of the things that smartphones can do. And the truth is, and of course now AI is yet another level, as we've been talking about. It's even taking technology even further. Now, it's easy for, I think, most of the people in here. I don't know all of you, but I imagine you think that concern is a little ridiculous. And I certainly have a smartphone, and I think everybody here does, and in this room anyway. And we wonder what's that about. But really, we have to have a little bit of humility, because first of all, even if you think that maybe the blanket ban of them is a little over the top, there are dangers that come from these things. First of all, it's easy access to destructive material. I mean, I often think, in the days of the shtetl in Europe, if you wanted to sin, if you wanted to do something bad, what could you do already? I guess he could be a thief. There was maybe the one loose woman in town who would be, whatever. There would be, non-Jews around. But what can you do? But now, in 15 minutes on the internet or less, you can see stuff that they didn't see in lifetimes in living, colored, and portrayed. It's unbelievable what you can see. And there are particularly young people, but let's be honest, older people too, who've have had serious problems with viewing pornography and viewing all sorts of other things, and maybe reading in all kinds of materials that they don't want to have within the strictly religious community. That's a problem.
Literally brainwash.
Brainwashing.
All of social media things and the echo chamber.
You mean because that it brainwashes us?
Yes.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of influencers out there that have messages that are problematic. Right.
I mean, I know I read something not too long ago where they talking to the Facebook actually has a whole department of people who they employ who are experts at putting in the type of content that will keep people there and not clicking away from it, and putting in certain types of stuff that that's their expertise. And look, the problem of doom scrolling is a huge problem. I'm honest. Doom scrolling, it's a problem I have. It's very easy to sit there on your phone and scroll and scroll and surf and see another little thing and another little thing. And before you know it, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours goes by, and you just watched a whole bunch of nothing, you know? They call it doom scrolling. There's this thing I've gotten over last, I think I showed it to you the other day. I think it's called Deep Stash. I'm getting a lot of ads for them. They're saying instead of doom scrolling, we have this thing that you can keep scrolling, but stuff that actually is, more intelligent, more interesting, good books and interesting facts. So you're not just wasting your time actually getting something. But even that, it's very addictive. People talk about dopamine and I don't know, all kinds of fancy things, but whatever it is, it's very addictive. And, I can't admit this to too many people, but I've been thinking about maybe I should have a kosher phone. Maybe I should I have my phone for when I need it to when I go out, when I do stuff, and maybe at home it's just wasting too many of my hours just sitting there with it. I haven't had the courage or to do that yet, but it might not be such a bad idea because I'm wasting way too much of my time. I find myself sometimes powerless to turn it off and come out and do something else. It's a big problem. And certainly with AI, it only gets even ever more so. So, and there's problems with children, and we'll talk about it a little bit later. Forget about from a religious perspective. Many people have talked about how all the over influences of computers and phones, etc., have taken people away from being able to concentrate on material, have taken people away from social interaction. I know I was not too long ago. I was on a subway or in a bus station. You see hundreds of people. 99.9% of them are looking at their phone. They're not talking to somebody else. They're not interacting with other people. It's just what Steve Jobs has done in giving such high quality devices that everybody can carry on in their pocket it's in many ways been very destructive, even though of course it has in many ways it's a wonderful blessing to have ways and to have information at your fingertips and to be able to do to a lot of things today you can't do you online when you go to a bank or want to do all sorts of things. I just deposited a check on my phone the other day. I don't know, it's endless, but it does come with a cost, and that so we have to have some respect for those who are worried about these things.
So you mentioned the swell letter from the Rabbi Movino.
Yeah.
But what do we have as sources to guide us from the Torah?
Okay, I'm getting to that. I'm just describing the problem right now, and we're going to get to some sources. Okay. So the question arises to sum it up. First of all, that the fact that it can do a lot of damage, does that make it bad? And is that so? Even though because it could be doing some good. So again, as we saw, some people say yes, but I don't think that one has to say that necessarily. There's a very famous Rashi at the beginning of chapter 1 at the very end of chapter 1 of Genesis of Bereshis, when it says that God saw all that He had done, v'hinei tov ma'od, and it was very good. All the other days He said he saw this, and he saw it was good. This was good. This was good. And on the last day, after everything was completed, it says it was very good. Tov ma'od. So what does Rashi say? Famous Rashi. Tov was what? The Yetzer HaTov. Tov Ma'od was Yetzer Hara. Tov is the good inclination. Tov Ma'od, very good, is the evil inclination. So what's that talking about? What does that mean? So Rashi is talking about a Yetzer Hara, he says, because that the evil inclination, without it, the world wouldn't work. As the Midrash puts it, if a person didn't have the inclination for pleasure and for money and for doing things, a person wouldn't get married, a person wouldn't build a house, a person wouldn't have children, a person wouldn't go into business. All those things come from that we have this imperative in of us, not just to sit there and study Torah all day, but we have also to take care of all sorts of financial and bodily needs. And that's why it's very good. It makes the whole thing work together. Well, if we want to say that about AI, right? The fact that it has some negative doesn't mean that it has a lot of positive. The point of, so what do? We have a Yetzer Tov, we have a Yetzer Hara, we have good inclination, bad inclination. Sometimes you see them on the shoulders, right? But the challenge that we have is to know that we have both of these things and to learn how to navigate them and learn them to use them responsibly. We don't throw out the Yetzer Hatov because it might be have a Yetzer Hara. That's the challenge that we have. Okay.
So one more time, make sure I understand what you're saying. Are you saying that the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, is very good as compared to the Yetzer Tov because it gives us purpose and it gives us the ability to make choices and to bring divineness to the earth?
You're asking, I'm repeating because I don't think everybody hears what you're saying on the Zoom, but you're asking is Yetzer is the evil inclination better because than the good inclination because it gives us those other choices? You could read it that way. Some do. I think the way I read it is more that it completes it. Without it would be good, but with it, it's very good when you have the two of them together.
The contrast.
Yeah, you have to have both.
Right? And you're trying to relate that to a double-edged sword of AI,
yes,
in which there is the very helpful side and the problematic side.
Right.
So that's okay. I just want to make sure I understood the approach.
Okay. And we see that actually in an interesting Gemara later. There's a famous Gemara, most of you heard about Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, the great sage, this great student of Rabbi Akiva, according to some, the author of the Zohar. We'll get into that, but certainly one of the great. He's quoted on every page of the Zohar, and he did most of that when he was hiding in a cave in a Pikain, which is in northern Israel. We used to go there pretty often because it was near where we lived. And he was in that cave for 12 years, a whole famous story. How did he get to the cave? So the Gemara tells the story that he was sitting with two of his colleagues, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Yehuda, and they were discussing current events where they lived, during the Roman period when there was a lot of persecution. Basically, this story happened probably at the beginning of Hadrian's rule, which was a good 100 years almost after or more after the destruction of the temple. No, not 100 years, 70, 80 years after the destruction of the temple. And they were discussing. And Rabbi Yehuda says, the Romans, they do some good things. They build nice roads. They build nice bathhouses. They markets. They do all these good things. You have to give them the credit that's due, right? I don't know how many of you have seen Monty Python's Life of Brian, but there's a scene taken right out of this Gemara. They're sitting there and they're discussing, what have the Romans done for us anyway? And they said, they did this, they did this, they did this. It's just like the Gemara says, but Rabbi Shimon said, nah, you know why they put bridges? So they could collect tolls. You know what I did? Markets so they could catch people from running away. You know what I mean? Everything he did, they did for their own purposes, and they're all corrupt and they're nothing, etc. And when the Romans heard about what he had to say, that they were going to kill him, and that's why he had to run away to the cave for a long time. Anyway, the point of why I'm reading it over here is that, yes, they did it. The question is why they did it. The ones who created AI. We have to understand. We have to understand about it. I think you mentioned this before. We have to know who built it. They have different motives. They put everything that's humanly created, and at least it's beginning to be created. Although one of the great dangers with AI, that at least in the science fiction, and there's some reality of it, that it gets smarter and smarter. It's starting to create itself and going beyond what any of its creators did. But they put in all sorts of things into it, and the question is who controls it, what's it, etc. What is it? What do we do? And is it good? Is it not good? It's partially. We have to see what was behind that. So the times that we need, and that's an important question. Whether when we have these things, and in fact, that brings us to something that the Rambam says, which is sort of on this point. He says in Hilchos Deos, Derech briyato shel adam lehiyot nimshach b'deotav u'b'ma'asav acharei re'av v'chaverav v'noheg keminhag anshei medinato. which means that a person, the way of natural ways that a person is influenced by the people around them, by the environment they live in, by their countrymen, by the way the mores and the standards and the politics and the opinions of the people around them, right? So people, and we need to know that, no man lives on an island. I mean, some people live on a mountaintop, but that's not the way we're supposed to be living. Even in seaside, one might say we're living away from the large centers, but even here too, we're influenced by a certain, I must say, very pleasant environment that we're in, but part of that environment is increasingly AI. Like I mentioned, I spend hours a day talking to my friend, Mr. ChatGPT. That's part of, and I talk to it like a person. And our phone, our feeds, our algorithms, information, right. Well, a lot of customer service today is AI for sure. When you call those machines, and if you're really lucky and you're very persistent, maybe you get to talk to a human. AI is doing most of that, right? So there's an interesting question, which comes from this Rambam. Not only what do I use AI to do, but AI is changing me. Because I interact with it all the time, it changes the way I think, and it changes my expectation and how I interact with the world. And that's also an important question, because as the Rambam says, we're influenced by all these things that we're busy with all day.
This one thing is like, as you're saying this, and it says, it talks about a friend, a father, davening in the morning, the bracha, so we say we should be kept away from an evil influence, whether Jewish or not Jewish, etc. And as you said, he's talked to them like a friend, so AI is becoming like a friend.
Yeah, I mean, again, for those who didn't hear what you said, basically, he's always saying in our prayers, we pray that we should be surrounded by good people and good friends and good things, and stay away from negative things. Well, if AI is somebody who we spend time with, we're worried about that, and to what extent. Okay, part of addressing these questions now is also to know, and I hinted at this before, that knowledge is not necessarily the same thing as wisdom. There's speaking of Pirkei Avot, there's an interesting Mishnah that says, Kol sheyirat cheto kodemet lechachmato, chochmato mitkayemet, v'chol shechochmato kodemet liyirat cheto, ein chachmato mitkayemet, which basically means if a person has the fear of heaven, in other words, integrity, they're doing the right things, and precedes the knowledge, wisdom that they have, then that wisdom lasts. But if first they have wisdom, and then the Yirat Shamayim, the degree of integrity, the degree of fealty to good standards is secondary to that, the knowledge doesn't last. And what is AI? It has a lot of information. It's very good at that, way beyond what any human can do, but doesn't have Yirat Shamayim. How do we deal with that? So there's
Yirat Shamayim is
Yirat Shamayim, like fear of heaven, like I said, to being able to. I mentioned it before, that it was integrity and doing the right things and keeping to our standards. It's the proper fear of heaven. So let's introduce this part by, first of all, there are many good things. That I'm not the first one who decided to talk about this topic, and there's a lot of nice things out there. Lori actually sent me some interesting things a half hour before I was going to give this, so I couldn't incorporate much of it, but I saw at least one of them. And one of them, there's a very interesting article that appeared in Jewish Action, I'm not sure, I think a few months ago. And there's somebody who I know, Rabbi Gil Student, who wrote an interesting article discussing many aspects. And here's a quote that I thought I should share with you. He said, this technological advance is maybe I should share this so people can read it along with me. Should I do that? Here, 1 minute. There we go. Okay. Here. This technological advance is a game changer that will dramatically alter the dynamics of business and the workplace itself. This is an important reason why our children at some point need to learn how to use it. and how to build with it. If they're going to function in the economy of the future, they need to know how to use AI for business purposes, how to do their jobs, and how to thrive in a world where AI is standard and becoming more so. It probably falls under the basic obligation that we have to child or trade. That's one of there's a Gemara in Kiddushin that talks about what our responsibilities are to teach our children. And one of them is to teach them and give them the tools that they have to make a living. Certain parts of the community don't seem to believe that necessarily, or whatever, won't get into that. But if we take that seriously, then, as even now, as we've been describing, AI is a huge thing. For young people coming into the world, if they're not going to know how to use AI and what to do with it and what it is, they're not going to. That's it. They're going to be. I said, I don't even know if they're going to be flipping hamburgers. They're going to have robots doing that soon. All much menial jobs are going to go away. They seems that would have to do that. In fact, and the Gemara says, "Kol she'eino melamed es b'nom umnus melamdo listus." If you don't teach your children how to make a living, you're in fact teaching them how to become a thief, because how else are they going to eat, right? So it seems that there's a positive Torah argument for literacy of AI, that people need it. On the other hand, he says it's not for me to give rabbis approval of that. Or I think they are right to be concerned. Our defining human asset is our mind, our ability to think, reason, and express our thoughts. We dare not outsource our thinking or expression to AI. Okay, that's what he had to say, and I think that's I think at the core of some of the issues here, which is that a lot of things I mentioned that I outsource, so to speak, some of my writing, etc., and things that I do to AI. Well, what can you outsource and what can you not outsource, right? There's an interesting expression. I heard this once from Rabbi Wein. Rabbi Wein, of course, one of the things he's most famous for is talking about history. I don't know, are you familiar with Rabbi Beryl Wein? Right? I don't know, Jeff, if you ever, no, he was one of my teachers. He actually signed my smicha, but he very, very important, influential person in my life and in the life of many. But he did a marvelous series on many aspects of Jewish history. And what? You've seen some of it? Okay. And he likes to describe, not just the PC version, but he likes to get into the nitty-gritty. And he described there were some brilliant people in our past who were absolutely brilliant, but they weren't very wise. Yeah, and that's I heard from him that term. He said, I thought that he said the name of as Eben Ezra, maybe it's Chovos HaLevavos. He says that there are people who were described as Chamor Nosei Sfarim. Chamor Nosei Sfarim, which literally means a donkey carrying books, right? Which means that you can imagine a donkey carrying an entire Beit Midrash library. It's all there. All the Torah is there. It's in there. It's in their head, right? But there's still a chamor. It's still a donkey, because they have a lot of information, but that doesn't make them wise. I think we all know people like that, by the way, that we've met people who are brilliant, but they don't have any common sense. They don't know what to say. They don't know how to interact with people. The things they say are just nuts, but they know a lot. They're and etc. So what's AI? It's nושא, a lot of sfarim, but is it wisdom or is it a chamor? Is it right? The ability to retrieve or recombine vast information is not necessarily understanding, right? And there are other. I'll skip over this. There are other Gemaras that say that the Gemara says that the Gemara talks about a person who knew halacha, sefri, tosefta, and Rav Nachman nevertheless referred to him as a tzana dmali sefri, a basket full of books. In other words, he wasn't impressed by his wisdom. Okay, because I have been. Lonnie wanted me to say this before. I'll tell you my own experience. When I was starting to this last when Israel attacked Iran, I think the United States attacked Iran was just before Purim, and there was this last go around like half a year ago, more than half a year ago, when. And that was called, Israel always gives different military operations, they give them a name. So this was called Sha'agat Ari, the roar of the lion. I don't know why they chose that, but they chose that. So entered my head, it's Sha'agat Ari. There's a very famous halachic book that deals with halachic literature called the Sha'agat Aryeh, right? And it talks about all sorts of famous halachic book. And it's just before Purim. So yes, ChatGPT, I have this idea. Find me someplace that the Sha'agat Aryeh talks about something related to Purim that I can relate to this war. And I wanted to write an article about that. And I'm published sometimes in some newspapers, and I thought that would help me start. And it came up like that. Oh yes, the Sha'agat Aryeh in this place says this, and that place says that, and he quotes the Rambam this. And I said, great. And I started to write it, and I fixed it up, and I wrote it, and I'm ready to submit to the paper. And then, I decided, what? Maybe I ought to actually look up what the original source says. Complete nonsense. There is no such source. It completely made it out of thin air, right? That thing. Oh, and again, and even when I called it on it, how did you do this? So it says, oh, well, I'm not going to do that. This time I'm going to get it right again and again and again. Makes it up. Simply makes it up. Right? There's always a disclaimer whenever you get into ChatGPT. It can make mistakes. You have to check the source. But this wasn't making a mistake. It's just totally, totally lied to me. Totally, and I've come to know what things I can trust it with and what things I can't. Certainly when it comes to looking up halachic sources, forget it. There are actually 2 or 3, I think there's the OU recently published a new AI that you can use to use up Torah sources. And there's another one, Sofer.ai, whatever. There's a few of them that are trying to address this problem, right? But, it's an extraordinary research tool, but it invents stuff. It makes some stuff. And that leads me to the big question that everybody has with AI, which is sort of related to what Dr. Young was talking about before. Can AI paskin a shaila? I don't know if you know what that means, but when you have a halachic question, when you don't know what the right thing is to do under Jewish law, what do we have to do? We have to go to, if you can, simple thing, you can look it up in one of the books, fine. But anything that's more than a trivial thing, you have to go to a rabbi to ask him the question, who's an halachic authority. That's when somebody's called rabbi, right? Classically, anyway, it wasn't somebody who can give a nice little sermon on Shabbos or somebody who can, do life cycle events. The job of a rabbi is to paskin shalos, is to answer questions of Jewish law. So, hey, there are lots of people for years already who've been going to Rabbeinu Google, right, to look up all sorts of things. But now AI is at the next level, as I've been trying to say. It doesn't just find sources for things, it actually reasons and comes up with things. So can you use AI to determine a question? And I would say, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And that's for several reasons. First of all, and that's not going to change, even as it gets more and more sophisticated, for several reasons. First of all, what I said already, that it doesn't get the sources right. But even if it gets, and sometimes it hallucinates, but that's only one ingredient. But there's another part that's the Gemara in Sota says like this: Kara v'shana v'lo shimesh talmidei chachamim. If a person learned, and he learned scripture, and he learned the Mishnah, and he learned Gemara, and he learned halacha, but he didn't serve under a great other posek, the Gemara says he's a boor, he's an amoritz, he's a this, all kinds of negative things about such a person. It's called shimush. It means you have to serve with somebody. Now, I think, I don't know, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think it's a little bit like that in the medical profession, right? You can't just walk out of medical school and be a doctor. You have to be an intern for a while. You have to learn from other practitioners. You have to see the way that they go. What? Oh, practice? You're still practicing. Yeah. But besides that, I'm saying learning from a mentor, learning from a higher colleague. Right? I think they do it quickly. You see one, you learn one, they teach one, then you do one, but they, something like that. But if you want to really learn how to do psak halacha properly, a person is supposed to sit with Poskin and watched them Paskin Shas. I remember Alan Kimchi was a friend of mine. He sat with Rav Neuvert for a year, just sat with him when he would meet, people would come and ask questions. He would just sit to watch what he did, because it's not about just the book knowledge. There's much more to it than that. Yes, of course you need the book knowledge and you need the sources, but you also have to understand the person. You have to understand the situation. You have to understand the broader perspective, what's going on. You have to understand facts and the circumstances. You have to have sensitivity to who they're asking and how they're asking and who they're asking about. Right. And you have to take responsibility for that decision. And that's not something that a computer can do, at least not yet. I don't see that it will be able to do that. That's a much broader thing. To give you one example, there's so many examples, but there's one famous example. The Beis Halevi was Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik, not the one from Boston, but his great-grandfather. Right. He was the Rav of Brisk. So the Beis Halevi was at one point in his life, he was the rabbi in the city of Brisk. And one day, a woman came and asked him a question on Friday night: can she make kiddush on milk? Okay, you're allowed to make kiddush on milk? Now, if they asked you this question, what would you be thinking?
If it's is that the drink of the nation?
What?
I would like to know why she's asking. Halachically, I think the question is that the drink of the nation?
So you're asking whether there's certain beverages other than wine that you can use sometimes, like if that's the common beverage, like, in Seattle, coffee, I don't know, other places, beer, I don't know. That's the question. That's not the way he approached the question.
Maybe it's the way,
What?
maybe if it was the only thing available. if wine was
Well,
available.
he said, let's think about this. First of all, obviously she doesn't have wine, right? Doesn't have the money to buy wine.
Or
Secondly, she's milk. What does that mean? What she's serving for the entree? She's not serving meat. She's not serving chicken, right? This lady is poor. And she doesn't have milk and she doesn't have meat. So he understood that we're dealing with this poor person, and he invited her to send them food for Shabbos because they didn't have anything. Okay? And that was a posek who was sensitive to what's being asked of him, to look beyond the question presented, to understand the larger picture of what's going on. What? Okay, that's one example of many examples. But and for instance, there are sometimes I know his great grandson Rav Soloveitchik, he's faulted for people saying, well, sometimes he said, people, he would quote him on, people asked a question, he gave this answer, and then somebody else asked a question, he gave him a different answer, and he just, he doesn't have it straight, he doesn't. But of course, they didn't understand what was going on. This person needed this answer, and another person with very similar circumstances, but it was a different person, he needed a different answer, right? This person, I would advise you should go to college and become an engineer. This person, I say you should stay in yeshiva or whatever. I don't know. There are many different things. Depends on who it is. You can't make all one size fits all psak for things, and that goes beyond what AI can do, right? It can assist the posek. But it has to learn. There's something called a Masorah. A Masorah is a tradition of how to weigh conflicting considerations. Jeff and I were talking about this the other day when we were talking about how people come to a different opinion. How it is that Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai can argue about something and come to different considerations. There are all kinds of considerations that go into any question, and the posek has to understand what's the right way to weigh it. And there may be different ways, and that's how come sometimes we find different rabbis come up with different answers to a similar question, because one is more feels that this consideration is the one that trumps, and then maybe that one. So those are again further things like that. Okay, and then there's another aspect. There's a famous statement. I'm not going to go into the whole background, where there was a whole story. We talked about the story Loba Shamayim. When the rabbis, there was a certain situation, again, we're getting late, so I'm not going to go through the whole story, but they were presented with a thing, and a certain rabbi was able to get a voice from heaven to prove that he was right. But the majority opinion is we're not interested. We're not interested in what heaven has to say, right? Could be heaven says this, but the basic principle of halacha is, once the Torah was given, humans, we have to understand this, and we have to make our own decision, and we're not interested with what they say in heaven. And and this is actually ChatGPT's line. I love it. If we do not automatically surrender halachic authority to a voice coming from heaven, we shouldn't sort of automatically surrender to a voice coming from a server. I like that one. So thank you. So that's that's a basic idea. He in fact there was a very famous book called the Ktsot HaChoshen. It's a classic book that's studied in all the yeshivas, and he's a very rigorous analysis of basically monetary law. It's an absolute classic. In his introduction, he writes about how important it is for humans to wrestle with halachic questions, and he brings that story of Lo B'Shamayim, and he says, we don't always get it right. Maybe in heaven they would decide differently. But that's what we're called upon to do. Halacha is such that it was given to us to deal with and to the best of our ability to work with it and to come up with the best that we can. And we can't outsource that to AI or to a computer to figure it out. It has to be humans who have to do that. Okay? There's a whole other section I'm not going to talk about here that came up a little bit in that case, but it's an interesting thing, which is, sometimes AI creates things. Are they real? Are they something that we have to worry about halachically? Like one thing that's a really negative thing, I guess, in a way, is in AI, the pornography has gone to a whole other level in AI because, because in general, right now, I think everybody knows that or should know that. Used to be, that when we didn't know if something was true or not, when we saw a picture of it, when we saw a video of this thing happen, we saw somebody said something, then because we saw it ourselves. Forget it. That does not exist anymore. With AI, you can create extraordinarily realistic looking things that are just not true, not real, all invention, didn't have, you cannot believe what you see anymore. It's just, it's unbelievable the level that it can come to. And, in the area of pornography, you can go and you can order up like an AI girlfriend you can tell you what kind of ethnic background she's from and what kind of body type she has and what kind of this and what kind of that. And then she can do whatever you want for her. So is that a problem halachically? We're not supposed to look at, let's say scantily clad women. We're not supposed to look at scantily clad women, pictures of women. How about scantily clad pictures of nothing? There is no such person. It's all AI. Is that a problem? Right? So those questions come up, but of course probably the answer is that the issue that besides looking at things, there's a problem of what's called hirhurei vera, that we're not supposed to be thinking about sin, right? And if what with concern is that the image causes sinful thoughts, then whether it's about a real person or an artificial person, does it really matter? And there's a lot written about that, in various places. If you're interested, I can show you to something. So let's get back to some other things. And another aspect of AI is we mentioned that a lot of the problem is that it's taking over a lot of employment things. And is that a good thing? Because there's a classic Mishnah, right, as a Hersheyan, very dear to me, Yafeh Talmud Torah im derech eretz. That if it's good if a person has Torah with derech eretz, with work. We call Torah she'eni mamalacha sofa betelat. If you just learn and you don't have work that goes along with it, then it doesn't work ultimately. That has that sentence. I'm not going to go there now, but in the Haredi world, there's a lot to talk about with that. Is a person required to work? Is it good to work? Is it God? But it seems, at least from the perspective I come from, that it's important to do work. And it's certainly for those people who are not, 100% learning full time. They need to feel productive. They feel that they're accomplishing things, they're doing things. And the more that AI is taking over a lot of the work that people used to do, it's a problem. I remember back when I was getting my master's in computers, this is probably in 1985, maybe, something like that. And I think about 1985, I was in Polytech in New York, and I remember a professor so how long ago was that? Almost 40 years, 50 years. A professor then said, we were studying computer science, and he was saying, we're studying this stuff now, but I'm telling you, in the future, there's only going to be two types of computer people. They're going to be the real, whizzes, the real people who really, are very, very highly paid specialists who can do code, and then they're going to be the users. And all the mid-level people, all the COBOL programmers at the time, or all the things, not going to need them. I didn't know what he was talking about then so much, but it's true. It's coming true right now. There's so much. So what are all those people going to do with their time? Baruch Hashem, if a person is into learning Torah, that's never a problem. Thank God you have more time to learn. It's great, right? That's what we look forward to someday. That in the time when Mashiach comes, our malachtam lasos al yedei acherim, the work will be done by others, and you'll be able to devote yourself to spiritual things and holy things and helping people, whatever. But for many people, that's not what are they going to do? And that's an issue. But we have to prepare people for that. It's going back to what Rabbi Student said before, and prepare our children for that in this world. Okay. And another aspect of that is, and there's been a lot of studies about this, not in the Jewish world, in the non-Jewish world, is AI making us dumber as people, more and more rely on AI to do all kinds of things. In academia today, it's a huge problem. Used to be that the professor would give their students, you have to write a paper about this and that. And, the big temptation is, why should I spend hours and hours writing a paper? I'll just tell the computer and it'll write it for me. Better, more correct, etc. I just saw something just yesterday. I saw a thing that a professor failed 35 out of 38 students because he was able to see that they were written by AI, the papers that they handed in. 35 out of 38 in this university that he was saying. It's a huge problem. And it's a problem not just on the university level, from little to, and the big problem is not only that they're cheating and they're not doing the work, they're not learning anything. You can produce all these things, but et cetera. And then going back to what Rabbi Kessler was saying in that thing, that's what he said. The only people who are going to really be, intellectually rigorous are the people who actually have to sit down with a Gemara and Rashi without chat, without this and without art scroll, without other things, and learn how to learn about Gemara, to learn how to do it. And the more that we have all these other things that do the work for us, that we outsource it, it's a huge problem. I use AI, I think, because basically I feel it's okay because I know how to write, I know how to this, so I'm just, doing it, and I check it and I go back with it. But if I didn't have that background, that I basically know what good writing looks like, and I know when it's, all the time, I always take it through a few iterations. Well, I didn't like the way you did this, I did that, and back and return it, and etc. That has to be something that's and there's all kinds of studies. Here at Microsoft, Carnegie Mellon study found that greater confidence in AI was associated with less self-reported critical thinking. It creates a kind of false mastery of the student outsources the work, and that's a problem. Outsourcing work we've used to for a long time, since the Industrial Revolution. Basically, we've used machines to do, to wash our clothes and to vacuum the floor and to do lots of things that used to be labor. But it should free us. But that comes with a cost, and we have to be aware of it and understand it. I'm just going to mention, because we're late, I'm not going to go into that case study. What the case study was basically about looking at, if a person develops a whole, bunch of stuff, and then somebody else uses AI and essentially takes, that's what AI does usually. It goes and it finds stuff on the internet, and it basically finds all the stuff that other people have written, and they come up with it. Well, is that a plagiarism issue? Is that a problem that I'm using something that benefiting from somebody else's stuff? And this goes back, there's an interesting stuff soon after the printing press was developed. One guy had a printer go, and in those days you had set type, right? You had to actually take the little letters and put it in the thing and then press it. That was a printing press. It wasn't like today. So he had somebody set type a whole Gemara, a whole set of Talmud with a certain commentary, right? And he paid him a lot of money to do that. And then after the printer printed off what he wanted, the printer said, you know what? I've already got this whole Talmud set in presses. You know what I'm going to do? Take out his commentary and then put into something else, and then use, in other words, 90% of the stuff that he had done and was paid to do by the other guy. Is he allowed to now use that for some other purpose? Is that a problem? And the Rabbi Yehuda and others talk about this question. It's a question, if you know what I'm talking about. This one is benefiting while the other one is not is not missing something? Can you benefit from us? And there's all sorts of ways is there a commercial loss to the other guy because now they're going to buy this one and not that one? All sorts of interesting things that the response will talk about. But the point for us here is who owns the material that the AI is now going to grab from everywhere. When AI goes and grabs all these other things, do I really have to owe something to those people who created these things? Because now AI did it, and that's an interesting question. If you're interested, maybe I can go through. There's a whole that whole shiur that I didn't end up doing that was about from that sources. If you're interested, we can go through that. So let's conclude and say basically that is it a blessing or a curse? Well, I don't think there's a simple answer to that. There's the Yetzer Hara, there's the Yetzer Hatov, the things that destroy and build. All right. And basically, and we also don't ask only what AI is doing lets me do, but what is it doing to me? And how is it making me smarter or less? What can we outsource? What makes us, where should we be reluctant? Should we, when it thinks itself, do we let it think for us? Do we let it make moral judgments? In our relationships and all these kinds of things. What can we hand over? What can we not hand over? Those are all questions that are interesting questions and need to come. And the final question is, no matter how much the information these machines possess, it's whether the human being using all that information possesses the wisdom and the judgment and moral responsibility to know what to do with it. And I think that's basically what it's about.